আপনি কি দেখতে চান কোনো একটা দিন ভবিষ্যতে আপনার ছেলের স্বামী ফ্যাক্টরির ওয়ার্কার হোক?
না 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 না, কারণ এখানে যে কষ্ট, যে ধরনের মানে খুব পরিশ্রম করতে হয়, আমি যেরকম পরিশ্রম করতেছি, আমি চাইবো না যে আমার ছেলে সেখানে পরিশ্রম করুক, ওই ধরনের কঠিন পরিশ্রম করুক, এটা আমি কখনো চাইবো না। যদি খোদার হাতে লেখা থাকে তো তার কিছু করার নেই। হ্যাঁ, এটা তো বর্তমানে এখন যে টেকনোলজির যুগ, এটা তো মনে হয় যে এটা এই ধরনেরই কিছু। আপনি জিনিসটা কিনতেছেন, কিন্তু কীভাবে তৈরি করেছে সেটা তো আপনি জানেন না। কিন্তু এটার ভিতরে যে কতজন কষ্ট, কতজন দুঃখ, কত স্মৃতি জড়াই আছে, সেটা কিন্তু এটা আপনার কাছে ভালো লাগছে, কিন্তু এই জিনিসের স্বাদটা বানাতে দেখা যাচ্ছে অনেক ওয়ার্কার হাতে নিডেলও ঢুকতে পারে, ভাত নাও থাকতে পারে, না খেয়ে সে কাজ করছে, এ ধরনের অনেক কিছু থাকতে পারে। কিন্তু এটা কে জানবে? একজন ক্রেতা কিন্তু সেটা কখনো জানে না। সে অর্ডার করলো, নিয়ে গেলো, টাকা দিল, শেষ।
When you shop for clothing on Amazon, you see a giant selection from many thousands of sellers, available for cheap and swift delivery to your door. It's part of the reason Amazon has become one of the largest apparel retailers in the United States. A Wall Street Journal investigation found that Amazon sells clothing from factories major fashion retailers have blacklisted for unsafe conditions that put workers' lives at risk. Amazon's size and structure mean it has less oversight of its supply chain than its competitors in the apparel industry.
Traditional retailers build trust into the supply chain by checking who is manufacturing their products, where they're sourcing the materials for it. Amazon Marketplace has more than 500 million products which are sourced by millions of different sellers. And Amazon doesn't know enough information about them to enforce the same sort of tactics traditional retailers would use.
An Amazon spokesman said the company audits the supply chains of its own brands, and the company's supply chain standards require its suppliers to provide workers with a safe and healthy work environment. He added that Amazon expects third-party sellers to meet these same standards. To figure out where clothing items on the site were coming from, the journal started with lists of unsafe factories and a database of 1 billion shipping records. Then untangled the web of importers, middlemen, and Amazon sellers. This child's top was for sale on Amazon by a storefront called Chili Pop. When you ordered it, it shipped from a clothing store called Cookies in Brooklyn, New York. But before that, it was imported by the owner of the Chili Pop brand, a wholesaler in New York's garment district called Trendset Originals. To reach Manhattan, it crossed the ocean in a shipping container all the way from Bangladesh, where it was loaded on a ship in the port city of Chittagong, the major export hub for Bangladesh's garment industry. In 2013, Bangladesh and its garment industry were rocked by the Rana Plaza tragedy, and the world was briefly attuned to where its clothing was coming from.
The death toll from a garment factory building in Bangladesh that collapsed is climbing. The collapse was blamed on shoddy construction and a disregard for safety regulations.
An investigation found the workers had complained about the cracks in the walls. More than 1,100 people were crushed to death and 2,000 injured. They were making clothes for well-known brands.
When factory collapsed, everyone was pulling the body, but I was pulling the levels. I was pulling the clothes. If we can't document who was sourcing this factory, they will be totally clean their hand and deny. For a renowned brand, we definitely can write to them. But if it is go through like Amazon, how are we going to make sure that who was the brand, where they sourced from? You just cannot track down.
Facing pressure after Rana Plaza, global retailers forged agreements with Bangladesh's garment industry, like the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh. The Accord and similar groups inspect factories and assist with safety improvements. When factories fail to improve unsafe conditions, they are listed as ineligible to work with major brands, like these U.S. brands, and these brands from major markets around the world.
If a factory has been so poor in their efforts or commitments to meeting the minimum life safety standards of our inspection, to the point where the 200 global brands that have signed the Accord said, we're not doing business with you. For somebody to go and manufacture at that facility with that knowledge is unethical. It's arguably criminal.
Cookie's director told the Journal that its suppliers pledged to use only safe factories and that Cookies would be taking action against Trendset Originals. A spokesman for Trendset Originals said it's sourced from Riverside Apparels through a middleman with whom they have cut ties. Factories in Bangladesh with documented unsafe conditions, in theory, should be barred from accessing much of the US and European retail markets. But many have found a back door through Amazon.
We know that it's happening because we know that the factories that we've made ineligible, they don't close. So they're getting orders from somebody other than Accord brands.
The Wall Street Journal followed the supply chain from 122 factories blacklisted by the Accord and similar groups that are still in operation. The Journal cross-referenced lists of the banned factories with a database of 1 billion shipping records, then connected the dots between the importers and Amazon sellers. The Journal could only access records for shipments sent directly from Bangladesh to the United States, but was able to trace clothing items from 51 of the 122 banned factories all the way to Amazon. Amazon removed these items after the Journal flagged them to the company. An Amazon spokesman said the company takes action against any third-party seller they learn is not meeting its supply chain standards. The toddler top the Journal traced from Amazon was made at a Chittagong factory called Riverside Apparels that has been banned by the Accord for unsafe conditions.
So this is a structural report from an initial inspection. All right, so this one, highly stressed columns. The engineers determined they were stressed because there's toilet blocks above them. This one is a finding where there's damage to the actual column itself at the base. The water tanks are weight. That needs to be considered in the capacity of the building. The water on the roof. It has to do with the integrity of the concrete and corrosion to some of the rebars.
The ownership of Riverside Apparels would not let the Wall Street Journal inside to film, but they granted an interview with their managing director at their new factory in Dhaka, which has yet to be inspected by the Accord.
Not having an Accord-compliant factory hurts the business to some extent, but then again, you cannot have an Accord-compliant factory right away. It's an ongoing process. There are issues that remain unsolved.
The tops were sewn by workers at Riverside and overseen by supervisors like Robil and Bahar.
মোটামুটি ভাবে সেফটি 100% সেফটি বলতে না, কিন্তু এটাকে যখন নিজেকে ভাবতে চিন্তা করে তখন নিজের ভিতরে অনেক ধরনের ভয় ভীতির একটা থাকে যে আসলে এটা কবে নাগাদ আমি নিজেকে সেফ মনে করব।
হয় যেমন মনে করেন যে আমার যখন রানা প্লাজা ধ্বংস হয়েছিল তখন হয়তো মনে যাচ্ছে গার্মেন্টসে আমাদের রানা প্লাজার এতগুলো ওয়ার্কার মারা গেছে, নষ্ট হয়েছে, মনে হয় যে গার্মেন্টসটা ছাড়িয়ে দিই বা গার্মেন্টসের নিজের ওয়ার্কার ভাবে না, কিন্তু কী করবে মানুষ, কিছু একটা করিতে জীবন চালাইতে পরিচালিত করতে হবে।
The Accord also found that Riverside Apparels has inadequate fire safety measures. When the Wall Street Journal visited the factory, these metal gates were closed over the front and rear exits while workers were inside. The Accord warns gates like these, whether or not they are locked, could trap workers trying to escape a fire or building collapse. and require factories to replace them with hinged emergency exit doors. When asked about the metal gates, Riverside Apparel's owners said keeping them closed was not the usual practice.
The financial aspects of compliance is pretty heavy. Obviously, I don't want to discuss the numbers, but it's pretty heavy. Many factories have the capacity to do it, many factories do not have the capacity to do it.
It isn't easy for garment workers to walk away from unsafe factories. Bangladesh's garment industry is the country's largest employer and, according to the World Bank, its only growth sector.
যেটা আমরা এখন বাঁচার তাগিদে কিন্তু গার্মেন্টসে চাকরি করি। কোনো জায়গায় যদি এই ধরনের কোনো সিচুয়েশন হয় ভালো একটা মানে গার্মেন্টস সেক্টর ছাড়া অন্য সেক্টরে যাওয়ার জন্য, তাহলে আমরা অফকোর্স আমরা এটা বাদ দিয়ে ওইটাতে যাওয়ার জন্য নিজেরা এগ্রি। 7 জন যে আমাকে যদি না যায়, আমি যদি না যাই আজকে আমার ফ্যামিলি থেকে যে অবস্থা, আমি যদি না যাই আমার দ্বারা আরও 7 জন মানে কষ্ট পাবে।
আমি প্রায় 7-8 বছর চাকরি করছি, বিভিন্ন গার্মেন্টসে চাকরি করছি। তো এখন শারীরিকভাবে অসুস্থ, সেই জন্য এখন চাকরি করতেছি না, 1 মাসের মতো চাকরি করতেছি না আর কি। কাজ করতে যে একটা মেয়েকে কাজ দেখাই দিচ্ছি, দেখা দেওয়ার পরে পিঠে একটু ব্যথা অনুভব করছিলাম। আমার পরিবার কাজ করতেছে, সেভাবে চলতেছে আর কি। হ্যাঁ, উনিও গার্মেন্টসে কাজ করে।
Amazon's competitors made commitments not only to improve factory safety in Bangladesh, but also workers' rights. Now Amazon is overtaking its rivals, bringing new practices and pressures to the apparel industry that undermine these efforts.
E-commerce has been showing a growth trend for the last couple of years. Mostly what's been selling through e-com is fashion, and Amazon is one of the big players in the market. Retailers, they want to provide the consumers with a variety of choices. I am having, say for example, 50,000 pieces to make, but with 20 different styles. For that reason, we have to find ways in which we can increase efficiency.
না, আমরা যতটুকু জানতে পারছি মালিক পক্ষ আমাদেরকে এখন বর্তমানে যে প্রেশারটা ট্রিট করছে, হ্যাঁ মানসিকভাবে আমি অস্বস্তিতে থাকি, স্বস্তিতে থাকি না।
এটা কিছু কিছু ক্ষেত্রে কিছু কিছু ম্যানেজার যখন যে প্রোডাকশন হয়নি, যখন তোরা নিজেরা বসে প্রোডাকশন ফিল আপ করবি, রাগান্বিত কথা বলে, তখন বলে তুই কাজ না পারলে উঠে যা, ওয়ার্কার অ্যাভেলেবেল আছে।
As Amazon's biggest competitors in apparel chase its e-commerce success, they're having similar issues keeping blacklisted factories out of their supply chains. The Journal traced clothing items from 22 banned factories to Walmart. Most were for sale on Walmart's third-party marketplace designed to mimic Amazon's. The Journal also found garments from one banned factory listed online by Target. A Walmart spokeswoman said the company is investigating the items it sells directly and will take appropriate action. Target declined to comment, but removed the items after they were flagged by the Journal.
Supply chain responsibility is a major issue for all companies. I think that the e-commerce brands should pay the same heed and make the same commitments to supply chain responsibility.
Buying from their store and buying online, it is a two different world. These online store like Amazon, they are working with many of those factories which has been blacklisted by the Accord. If it is continuous, you don't know, maybe we're going to see another Rana Plaza catastrophe.
অর্ডার করছেন, মালটা বাসায় আপনার জিনিসটা প্রোডাক্টটা পৌঁছাই গেছে, আমি তো শার্টটা সুন্দর হয়েছে, কোয়ালিটি ভালো, কীভাবে তৈরি করেছে সেটা তো আপনি জানেন না।
আমি চাচ্ছি যে ও জানো যে এটা আমি বাহার তৈরি করছি, এটা আমার ওয়ার্কার তৈরি করছে, এটা আমার মাধ্যমে ওরা জানুক যে এটা আমার হাতের উপর দিয়ে গেছে, ওটা আমি জানতে চাই।